Once upon a time, in a far-off land known as the Great Swamp, life flourished. Deep within this dense green forest there stood a castle, a fortress carved from the swamp's mightiest tree. It is home to King Phybius, a brave little frog who long ago saved the Great Swamp and all of its inhabitants. His tale began long before he was king, when a drought threatened the existence of the entire swamp. Water became scarce and the lands grew very, very dry. Members of Phybius's village worked day and night to conserve the disappearing water. It was during this time that the gators came from the dried southern swamplands. In their search for water they stumbled upon the village. The gators' king was Borg, a ruthless tyrant. He and his gang enslaved the village, forcing everyone to collect water for their wasteful pleasure. Phybius was a young frog, full of spirit. It made him angry to see his village suffer. He wanted nothing more than to see the gators go. Late one night, Phybius awoke to find his father, Glum, leaving the hovel. He wondered where he was going, and he was much too curious not to follow. Phybius trailed close behind, and after a short time they reached the home of Bevan, the woodsmith. Phybius ran to the window to see what was going on. Inside, Bevan's home was filled with the elder villagers. A meeting was about to begin. Suddenly a voice cried out over the crowd. "We must fight the gators to the death!" shouted Pipsqueak, a timid but outspoken rabbit. The villagers were quick to disagree. The gators were much too fierce to fight. Frustrated and angry, Pipsqueak stormed out the door. "I'll show you," he vowed. "I'm not afraid." Soon after, another voice was heard. It was Emo, a very old and wise turtle. "The owl can save us," he said. "She has great magic power. She would know what to do." Everyone respected the old turtle, but too few believed in magic. Besides, the owl was never seen and said to live deep within the swamp. The meeting seemed hopeless, and before long it ended. Phybius sat in the shadows as the villagers left Bevan's lodge. He thought of the old turtle and his story. The others didn't believe Emo, but he did. That night Phybius decided that he would find the owl. He followed the path that led into the deep swamp. The forest grew dark and scary. As Phybius walked along, he bumped into Pipsqueak, catching him completely by surprise. "Did I scare you?" asked Phybius. "Nonsense!" replied the quivering rabbit. "What brings you out here?" Phybius told Pipsqueak about the owl and of his plan to seek her help. "I will join you," said Pipsqueak. "You may need my protection." Phybius was pleased to have his company, and together they wandered into the deep swamp. Days passed, and finally they reached what appeared to be a nest, nestled high in the hollow of an old tree. Slowly they made their way up. Inside it was dark, and unfortunately empty. "Let's go," Pipsqueak said. "There's no owl here." Just then the shadowy figure of the owl covered the entrance. "Who goes there?" she wailed. "I am Phybius," he answered. "We heard of your magic powers, and have come to ask your help." "I'm afraid I have none to offer. My powers all withered along with the forest. But I may have something." She reached into a dusty jar perched high upon the shelf. She pulled out a small pouch and handed it to Phybius. "What is it?" he asked. "The pouch contains a very old and magic powder," she replied. "I'm not quite sure how it works, but perhaps it can help you." When they returned, they found the villagers hard at work. The water had run out, and they were forced to dig for more. Phybius and Pipsqueak spied through the tall dry grass, unaware of the danger behind them. "Why aren't you working with the others?" shouted a gator guard. "Take them to the king." Soon they stood before Borg. "So you choose not to work for your king," he said, grinning a very hungry grin. Phybius knew then that he had no choice but to try the owl's magic. He held a pouch high above his head. "I hold great magic power," he said. "Set my village free, or face the consequences." All the gators laughed, except for Borg. "I will swallow you whole," he growled. Phybius grabbed a handful of the magic dust and threw it at the king. Everyone watched in amazement as Borg grew silent, mesmerized by the cloud of dust. "Achoo!" sneezed the Gator King. "You'll pay for that," sneezed the angry king as he raised his scepter skyward. "Run!" yelled Pipsqueak. Suddenly, from out of nowhere, the great owl swooped down upon the crowd. With a mighty swoosh, she grabbed the would-be heroes, taking them into the sky. In the excitement, the magic dust spilled into the air. Phybius hurried to save what was left, but most of it had scattered in a trail behind them. Magically, the dust began to swirl as it reached the open sky. In an instant, clouds formed, covering the sun. Thunder rumbled, lightning flashed, and rain poured over the land. Overwhelmed by the fierce winds and driving rain, the owl and her passengers helplessly crashed to the ground. Before they could recover from the crash, they were surrounded by a pack of angry gators. "You may have ended the drought," yelled Borg, "but I still rule this land." Phybius quickly jumped to his feet. He grabbed more of the magic dust and once again threw it at the king. Just like before, Borg sniffled and sneezed. "Seize them!" cried Borg. Phybius stood his ground and gave each gator a snoutful. One by one they stopped to sneeze and sneeze. The mighty Borg fell to his knees. "Stop!" he snorted, continuing to sneeze. "No more! I can't stand it!" Phybius held the pouch high. "Then go away," he shouted. "Go away, or I'll let you have it again." Borg and his gators scrambled to retreat. In an instant they ran out of sight, sneezing all the way. The villagers cheered as the gators ran away. Free at last, they danced about the rainy field. The owl spoke out, interrupting the celebration. "Phybius has saved the great swamp, and he has rid you of the tyrant Borg. For his bravery, he deserves much more than our gratitude. He has earned the right to be king." Everyone agreed. Phybius was proclaimed king, and Pipsqueak his first knight to the throne. From that day on, the great swamp grew greener than ever. Everyone prospered, and as for the gators, they were never seen again.